Good evening and welcome to Health and Liberty Canada. Tonight's topic is preparation for pandemics. My name is Nwamiko Madden and I'll be hosting you tonight throughout our journey in exploring this very interesting topic. And tonight we have three presenters, the first of which I'll be introducing because the person is actually a close friend. Dr. Pekka Maattanen studied cell and molecular biology at the University of Toronto. And I also had the opportunity to be there at his PhD defense when he was at McGill University in biochemistry. And from there, Pekka went on to spend 3 years as a postdoctoral fellow in Saskatoon, studying transmissible spongiform encephalopathies, which is mad cow. And he also worked on vaccinations for cows. From there, he spent 2 years at Sick Kids Research Institute in Toronto, studying dietary impacts on intestinal infections. And in 2016, Pekka accepted the call to become an assistant professor at Burman University. And wow, what a beautiful event that was, because where I am from in Alberta, I know that the university appreciates him very much. And one of the things I can say about Pekka is that there's very rare people that you meet in life that are very, very, very intelligent. And there's also very rare people in life, very rare occurrences in life where you meet people that are very, very kind. Pekka is one of those rare individuals that is extremely kind and extremely intelligent. And the Lord has just gifted him tremendously, and he bestows those gifts back to service and ministry. So really excited to introduce him tonight. His wife, Sarah, and his three kids, Isaac, Lilia, and Mina, they're also probably watching. So I know that they'll be blessed by the presentation, and as will yourselves as you listen. And he's going to be talking to us about immunization. So I'll say a prayer, and then the next voice you'll be hearing is going to be that of Dr. Pekka Maattanen. Dear Father, we thank you so much because you are our creator. And we thank you for the opportunity to look into the study of science, because you are not only the author of the scriptures, you are the author of this world and of science. And so as we bring together those two ideas, these two different worlds, I ask that you help us to see harmony, help us to see hope, help us to see the possibility of healing as we face the pandemics that we face in this world, and give us the encouragement that we need to hear for every single listener that is watching. That's my prayer in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Brother Nwamiko, for the kind introduction. It's really a blessing to be here with everyone. I'm thankful for this opportunity to share and for the chance to just spend some time with each and every one of you who's joined us online. Hopefully we can all learn through this process. I believe as Nwamiko shared, we have an incredible immune system. We have an incredible creator who's made us. And as we consider the aspects of how our immune system works, hopefully we'll have a better understanding of how we can better improve it so that we can deal with issues like pandemics that we're facing right now. So with that, I'm gonna try and see how I can share my presentation with you. Just 1 minute. And make it big for everyone to see here. Okay, so you might be wondering, why am I showing a picture of the world when I'm talking about our immune system? So I'm not going to talk about so much about immunization as I will about the immune system, but hopefully, when we get a better understanding of how our immune system works, as I said before, we'll have some clarity as to the ways we can improve, enhance that, and hopefully be able to get to the point where we'll all be as healthy as possible and be able to share this health with others as well. So the picture of the world, why do I show this? Well, I want us to take a step back and consider that God is truly our creator, and not just the creator of this earth, the creator of the universe. And so when we take a look at God and we realize just how big he is, we can recognize also that he cares about the little things right within us, and the building of our body, every different part of it is so amazing that it hopefully will, as we go through this and as you consider in your own sort of sphere of influence and also in your own sort of personal look at the way your own body functions, you'll realize, wow, I really am fearfully and wonderfully made. So the big picture helps us. So first, I want to touch on, this is a bit of an outline for what I'm going to go through today. So where does everything come from? Our body, nature, scripture, all comes from the same source. And so I want us to take a look at that perspective. The other thing that I want us to consider is what does the manual say, or what inspiration have we been given on how to operate this amazing body that we've been given by God, the temple of the Holy Spirit. And then the next thing I will touch on then is, what does science say, or what do we know? How do we understand our immune system? What is the function of it? Looking specifically at innate and adaptive immunity. And then I'm going to go into a little bit of how those aspects of innate and adaptive immunity actually will tie in with the manual, and how the manual actually enhances the immune function and helps it run optimally. So with that, let's dive in. You might hear a little bit of door banging around. I'm in my home with my children, but I'm excited to be here with you. So just a minute. I'm going to close the door just to make sure I don't bring in too much. Thank you for your patience with me on that. Okay, so as we dive in, as I mentioned before, we have the source of all things, both scripture and nature, is God. And a lot of times, and we're going to look more at the scientific side of things, but it happens in scripture as well. We have this human interpretation that comes in between and starts to sort of give us some aberrations in what reality actually is. But ultimately, God's revelation of his will for us, his manual for the way our body functions, won't disagree with science, because science comes from the same source, right? Ultimately, true science, or science rightly called, not the science falsely so called. What I want to start with is this quote, which I find is really beautiful. I share it often. Since the book of nature and the book of Revelation bear the impress of the same mastermind, they cannot but speak in harmony. By different methods and in different languages, they witness to the same great truths. Science itself is ever discovering new wonders, but she brings from her research nothing that rightly understood conflicts with the divine revelation. The book of nature and the written word shed light upon each other. They make us acquainted with God by teaching us something of the laws through which he works. Education, page 120. So I share that with you, just making sure that we have the same sort of context that we're starting from. Now, when we talk about God as being our source of all things, his health laws are ones that we should consider. And the analogy I want to bring is, let's say you get a vehicle from, you purchase a new car, maybe it's a new electric vehicle, because, I certainly wouldn't know too much about how to repair one of those new electric vehicles. And the car comes with a manual, and the manual tells you how to take care of that vehicle. And so what you do is you take care of that vehicle as best you can according to the manual, even if you don't know how the car works, because you know that the producer of the car, the manufacturer of the vehicle, has given you the best instructions to take good care of that car. So the same goes for God's instructions for us. So here's the instruction manual, if you will, that we've been given. Pure air, sunlight, abstemiousness or temperance, rest, exercise, proper diet, the use of water, not just drinking water, but the use of water, trust in divine power. These are the true remedies. Every person should have a knowledge of nature's remedial agencies and how to apply them. It is essential both to understand the principles involved in the treatment of the sick and to have a practical training that will enable one rightly to use this knowledge. The use of natural remedies requires an amount of care and effort that many are not willing to give. So it's not simple necessarily. And I think we'll learn about that more in the webinar, but it's very rewarding and works well. Nature's process of healing, let me just make it so that I can see myself here. Whoops, back here. Nature's process of healing and upbuilding is gradual, and to the impatient, it seems slow. The surrender of hurtful indulgences requires sacrifice, but in the end, it will be found that nature, untrammeled, will, whoops, keep going ahead here, does her work wisely and well. Those who persevere in obedience to her laws are going to have the best results in the end, ultimately, right? You can read that. Hopefully I'm still stable there. Yes, we'll reap the reward in health of body and health of mind. So that untrammeling, I want to bring that out as an important point. That word we don't use very often now, but I think it could be rightly translated, not getting in the way, right? So when our body tries to heal itself, or when the systems in our body, for example, fever, which we'll talk a little bit about shortly. When fever starts happening, don't get in the way, right? Cooperate with it. As you cooperate with that natural process that's helping you heal, it will give you a better result in the end. You can actually, by cooperating with it, you can actually do much better. So what are these main, just in picture form, we'll look quickly at these main remedies that we all need, of course, in order to live optimally. Nutrition is one of them. Then we have sunlight. And I notice I purposefully took this picture to illustrate this because this is like triple dose therapy in one. So you can be outside running, getting fresh air, sunlight, and exercise all in one. So God provides convenience for ways for us to actually acquire the things that he provides for us. Water, pure water, clean water, plenty of water, keeps us hydrated, keeps our mucous membranes functioning, which we'll talk a little bit more about when we talk about our innate immune system. Rest, one that I sometimes, especially when my kids were this young, this is my son when he was quite little, I didn't get as much rest at that time. I still probably don't get as much as I should, but that's an area for me to improve. And this is, we all need to consider all of these laws of health and trust in divine power. Now, my kids grew, these are my three kids, just to sort of connect the dots here. My kids grew as I fed them, just like these plants grew when God, not exactly the same way, but God gave them sunshine. They grew. I didn't come and put my effort into, we just planted the seeds, right? That's all that happened. In fact, some of those seeds planted themselves. But the reality is those plants grew on their own through God's power. My children, I don't have any credit really in making them grow. It's through cooperating with him. It's through trusting in God and actually laying down them and just seeing them grow and develop in relationship with him as well is a beautiful thing, because I can't take credit for that. All I can do is provide the environment within which that can happen. So trusting in God, so important, having that hope, having that understanding that if I do all that God has given me in the instruction manual, then I can trust him that the functional equipment will work, right? It will work according to plan. So this text I like to share, and trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him and he shall direct thy paths. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. So with that, now that we've looked at kind of framing the position of where we're starting from, I want to talk a little bit about immunity now, because that was what I was supposed to talk about. You might have been wondering, what am I actually talking about here? But importantly, I'm talking about immunity here. And what is it? So in a broad sense, it's the ability to ward off disease. And what is susceptibility? The lack of resistance to disease. So when we talk about immunity, we often talk about two different things. And innate immunity is the defense against any pathogen that's already present at birth. So it's innate, or it's in the child, in the baby, in the neonate. So it's innate. It's already there. You've got it. You don't have to go out and buy it. You don't have to learn it. You've been given it. Adaptive immunity is a little bit different in that it's the developed resistance or the learned memory component to immunity, slower to respond, but it has this memory component, which is very powerful, and it's actually quite powerful. So a very important part of immunity. They're both really important, both adaptive and innate. So when we look at innate immunity in a little bit more detail, it's non-specific. So what is it? It's pretty much everything like physical barriers like skin, mucous membranes, immune cells. But when you think about that, you realize, sometimes your skin is cracked. Maybe your mouth is dry. Maybe you're feeling not the best in your guts. A lot of times your innate immune barrier function might be compromised. And so those are the first ways that viruses get into you, or any kind of pathogen for that matter. So having a robust barrier, having a shield around you that is adequate is really, really key. But innate immunity also extends not just the physical barrier, it extends into things like immune cells, some certain types of immune cells, which will eat the invaders that come in. And responses like fever, and I mentioned that a little bit earlier, and inflammation. So the general patterns that we see, or that these cells are able to detect, we call them pathogen-associated molecular patterns, or PAMPs. But for the purpose of what we're talking about, they're just patterns on the cells. They're not really specific, but they're these patterns that, let's say, a virus or a bacterium have on the surface, and these cells will actually engulf them as a result because they look different, or they don't look like they belong. It's really the first line of defense. So innate immunity is really critical. So what are the components of innate immunity? Well, here we talked a little bit about skin, mucous membranes, antimicrobial substances. These are things that are produced by your cells to try to kill anything that's trying to invade. But notice, and I really want to, sometimes this is a kind of a byword, because we might say, well, that's your barrier, big deal. The mucous membranes in particular, think of your nose, think of your gut. Are you drinking enough? What have you been eating? Are you eating a high fiber diet? If you're eating a fiber diet, actually, it's known that your mucus layers in your gut will increase in thickness. Thicker mucus layers, better barrier, right? So these are all really important. If you can beef up prevention at this barrier level, you can really protect yourself, and also try and avoid sticking things like your finger up your nose, which is, let's say, getting an immunization for a particular infectious disease. Inflammation, fever, and phagocytes. So those are the next stage, if you will, as I mentioned, and we'll touch on them a little bit now. And then the last part, we'll talk about adaptive immunity, which is adhumoral and cellular immunity. Okay, so what's in your blood? Well, if we look in our blood, you can take a tube of your blood. This is kind of a cartoon of a blood tube. You've got about 60 to 70% of the white blood cells in your blood are neutrophils. Okay, neutrophils. Call them neutrophils because they stain kind of neutral, pinkish in their nuclei. Lymphocytes, then another 20 to 25%. We'll talk a little bit more about them. The B and T cells. And then you have monocytes, eosinophils, basophils. There's some other cells there, but those are the main ones. And notice how they're much smaller. So the neutrophils are really your main white blood cell type. Vast majority of them are neutrophils. So if we look at this now, don't worry, we're not going to have a test at the end. Some of you probably very familiar with this, others maybe not as familiar, But the main point here is that there are a variety of different types of cells involved in your immune function. And I want to draw your attention, if you're looking at this, notice how there's two branches here. There's the innate immune response and there's the adaptive immune response. Notice this adaptive immunity is, we'll talk about more, intermingles with, and there's actually more intermingling than is shown in this diagram. It's very difficult. The immune system is most certainly not fully understood. So just like I said, you know, how I wouldn't understand how exactly this electric vehicle works necessarily if I buy one. Same thing goes for my immune system. None of us have a full comprehensive understanding of the immune system. So knowing that it is complex is very important. We need to be humble and recognize that we don't necessarily understand all the workings of it, but we do certainly know some of the basics. So when we look at the adaptive immune system, you have B cells, you have T cells, you have killer T cells, which are your CD8 T cells, you have your helper T cells, your CD4. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, but looking at this left side here, there's quite a number of different innate immune cells. So I'm going to do a bit of a description of those on the next slide, but what I wanted to just kind of have you see is there's a variety of different shapes, even colors, if you will. Of course, this is a cartoon, but they have different functions based on their structure. So they work differently. Dendritic cells have these long appendages. They can grab and sample any potential pathogen that might be there. They actually take it in and then they'll present it on their surface and tell other cells, oh, there's danger here. And then that can actually ramp up, for example, some of these lymphocytes to start making more antibodies in the end, ultimately. Macrophages, these go around and engulf cells, any foreign entities as well. They also help to produce they might produce some pro-inflammatory things like cytokines. You may have heard of the cytokine storm when we talk about SARS-CoV-2 infection. They also actually produce large amounts of omega-3 derived anti-inflammatory, or I would say pro-resolving molecules. Very important. We'll touch on that a bit later. Natural killer cells. These are not really so much involved in infection. They're more destroying cells. They might be destroying cells that are infected, but they're not actively killing microbes or agents that come into your body. They're more going to be against cancer and that sort of thing, or cells that are not presenting on the surface as they should be. And then eosinophils, and notice the neutrophils here, basophils. We'll touch on them in the next one a little bit here. So I wanted to touch on neutrophils a bit because they are the most abundant cells. So you might be like, well, they're the most abundant, they must be pretty important, right? And indeed they are. So what are they doing in the case of an acute viral infection? They recognize general patterns of invaders. So they'll see those invaders. But remember, this is general. And then they will destroy them. They could release substances to destroy those viruses. Actually, the antiviral effects of neutrophils have only been more recently appreciated. They produce cytokines, chemokines, antimicrobial agents. They can make a respiratory burst. What's this? They can basically produce a massive amount of stuff that will destroy whatever's near them. Unfortunately, that can get out of hand. So one thing that they do in cooperation with the adaptive immune response, which we'll talk about more in a minute, they can recognize when antibodies are bound to something else, they'll recognize that antibody, and that will actually kind of like a sugar coating. It will tell them, oh, I need to eat that thing, whatever that antibody is bound to. So they'll go and they'll engulf it and destroy it. But one of the things, as I mentioned, is sometimes they can get out of control. You might get excessive inflammation. And this is actually seen in SARS-CoV-2 infection. One of the things that people believe, many of the researchers and medical doctors that are working on this particular infection, is that infiltration of neutrophils into regions in the lungs can be a major issue if it gets out of hand and isn't controlled. It starts to destroy those tissues. You start to see damage there that you don't want. So excessive neutrophils, we'll come back to that, because you might say, well, why does that get out of hand? It's your normal immune system. Well, we'll talk a little bit about why that might be the case for some people. So here's kind of a cartoon of a neutrophil, just so you can kind of see what a neutrophil would look like in 3D. But notice it has these granulocytes in it. And these granulocytes actually, they individually contain a variety of different molecules, chemistries. They, for example, myeloperoxidase, some of these different components that will actually destroy pathogens. The other thing that neutrophils can do, this is kind of a more recent discovery, is that they produce something called neutrophil extracellular traps. So you can actually take parts of their chromosome and they can shoot them out and attach some of those potent antiviral or antibacterial molecules to them and shoot them out and catch an invading pathogen, kind of like a net. So we call it, like, even though the neutrophil extracellular traps are kind of like nets, you shoot them out and just grab stuff. It's pretty cool thing that they do. Somewhat controversial. Unfortunately, it seems like when the nets get out of control, we can also see damage. So neutrophils need to be kept in line and not overreactive, if you will. So here's a table of these different immune cells and their involvement in either both innate or adaptive immunity. So I didn't touch on too much the roles of basophils and eosinophils. Some are involved more with parasites, not as much engaged with viral infections as we're interested in now. Notice mast cells could be important though, killing infected, potentially virus-infected cells. The neutrophils are phagocytosing or phagocytizing bacteria and fungi. Monocytes, dendritic cells, I kind of touched on these already. So they're able to, they're grabbing and they're sampling. And then what they do is they take those antigens and put them out on the surface. And then as a warning sign, the natural killer cells that kill cancer and potentially virus-infected cells, which is important because viruses often what they do is they make the cell stop telling the outside world that there's something bad inside. The virus may actually shut down systems that will normally be the kind of safety signal for that cell. If that happens, a natural killer of this body, time to destroy you, right? So they naturally will kill the cell that's not behaving properly. Oops, I went ahead a little bit. And then I'll go into adaptive immunity later more, but the plasma or the B cells, B cells are basically your antibody producing cells, but they convert to plasma cells, which are the factories for antibodies. And they have that memory component. And then the T cells are the ones that can either help the B cells to make lots of antibody, or they can be cytotoxic. They actually go and kill other cells. So infected cells, for example. Okay, so let's go on. I want to talk about that other aspect of innate immunity, which is inflammation. Okay, inflammation, as hopefully is captured by this slide, is four main things: pain, heat, redness, rubor, and swelling. Right? All these things don't sound super awesome, right? Maybe heat, maybe some of us would like some heat when it's wintertime, but most of the rest of them are kind of uncomfortable. Well, it's actually good that they're uncomfortable because we need to know that there's an issue. But not only that, the processes of heat and redness and swelling, they're allowing all those good innate and actually adaptive immune functions to come into place. For example, neutrophils to infiltrate in that region where the infection is. They're going to get there and they're going to start acting to try and get rid of whatever's infecting you and clean it up. So there is a function for inflammation. Now, one thing is, as I mentioned with neutrophils, they might get out of hand. And this has been linked to the ARDS, which you see with SARS-CoV-2. However, there are ways for the neutrophils to be toned down. And one of those ways is through the action of actually macrophage secreted omega-3 derived, okay, this might be a mouthful, pro-resolving lipid mediators. Now, you don't have to know the structures of these, but it's quite fascinating. All of you have probably heard of omega-3. I think it's probably the most, in fact, it is the most taken supplement, or at least it was maybe it's vitamin C or zinc, or maybe vitamin D now, but omega-3 was the most taken supplement not too long ago. And the reason for that is not just for its brain effects, because it is important for mental function, but it also has these anti-inflammatory properties. Now, I say anti-inflammatory with some reservation, because remember from our last slide, inflammation is good, right? So you don't want to take away inflammation prematurely or unnecessarily. You want to cooperate with your body's function of inflaming the tissues. So what do? Well, when the inflammation has taken its course, your body cells need to produce, in this case, macrophages, produce these lipid mediators that actually actively clear up the infection and stop the process of inflammation. So those neutrophils that were getting really angry and shooting nets out and doing all kinds of stuff, they need to be told, calm down. It's time to move on and go to a different place, because we've already dealt with that issue. And that is what omega-3 derived pro-resolving lipid mediators do. Really cool, an area of active study, not proven yet to be, resolution of SARS-CoV-2 infection per se, but has been demonstrated in other infections to be very important. So I would argue that if you're only taking your D and your zinc and your those things, make sure you're still taking your omega-3, or eat plenty of ground flaxseed, or get some algae sourced omega-3 oil, which is high in EPA and DHA. Notice the EPA and DHA are shown here. Those are the precursors for these pro-resolving lipid mediators. Okay. What can be bad about what we eat? Remember, nutrition is one of those 8 laws. Well, notice there's the omega-3 pathway for forming these EPAs and DHAs. There's also the omega-6 pathway, which unfortunately can promote inflammation. And we get a lot of those omega-6s in corn oils and soy oils that we eat too much of generally when we go to the restaurant, right? So really important to try to balance this out and get more omega-3 and less of the omega-6. If you make it yourself, you know what oil you put in. Okay, and that's just a quick slide to show you what's the highest in arachidonic acid, which is just the precursor to really inflammation. It's really the meats that are high in those things. Okay, what about heat? Now, this is the part of inflammation that I think is so important and maybe doesn't get enough press, but hopefully among you guys has been a popular or interesting thing. Hydrotherapy can actually increase or cooperate with the heat that you're experiencing. But what is the function of heat generally at the innate immune level? Well, it turns out heat increases the production of interferons. Now, interferons, just like the name suggests, they interfere with virions. So they interfere with the production of virus. So that's exactly what you want to do early in your infection. The problem is, and they also kill germs, just straight up, the heat will kill germs, and can trigger the formation of natural killer cells, killer T cells. There have been studies showing that. Cold also can stimulate the production. So remember, you could be either hot or cold would be important. One of the things that I want to bring out is you can achieve hydrotherapy or heat through a variety of means. You can go take a hot shower in your own shower. And I'm sure Joyce is going to talk about that more. But we're going to talk a little bit more about what is the mechanism of the action of the heat. Basically, the upregulation of interferons is really powerful because SARS-CoV-2, what it does is it tries to inhibit interferon production. So as soon as it's infected a cell, it has like 5 different ways, and we don't have enough time to go through all those different ways, but it has 5 different ways that it tries to stop interferon production. However, or the effects of interferon, one way or the other. If you heat yourself early on, if you do this fever treatment, can really get around that issue and get the interferon production high enough so that cells are warned. So what is, as I mentioned, interferon? What are they doing? These are cytokines produced by cells. They have antiviral activity. You have interferon alpha and beta. What happens is when the interferons are produced in one cell that's been infected with the virus, they tell the next cell nearby, you need to make antiviral proteins. Okay, these antiviral proteins will inhibit viral replication. So just to show it in a little bit more real schematic form, this heat that is inducing this production of interferons, it can also happen naturally through fever that you experience. This is one reason why we have fever. But those cells, as they replicate the virus within them, they will start making as well alpha and beta interferons. Those interferons will go on to tell the neighboring cells to stop making virus. So basically it's a pre-warning, don't let that virus be made in you. And it's a great way for you to get a head start on the virus, which is trying to leap from cell to cell and get your body more and more infected. So as I mentioned before, as it's at the bottom of the slide here, there's 5 different ways SARS-CoV-2 tries to do this, but fever and hydrotherapy tries to interfere with this process. Fever and hydrotherapy will actually bypass that and maintain interferon production. So really powerful way. And for me, of course, the Finnish sauna is my way of choice, but you can do it by hot water therapy or just hot showers or even getting in a hot bath. And cold contrast can really also help. So now to touch on the adaptive immune system, pretty briefly, I'm not going to spend forever on this, but the adaptive immune system targets specifically the pathogen. So it's acquired through infection or vaccination. You can, it's any kind of exposure to, parts of that virus per se, or bacterium, whichever. And the interesting thing is your immune system develops this response, this very specific response, kind of slowly at first. So the response time is not super fast. And then if you do get re-exposed to that particular agent, then you get a much faster response. So we'll take a look at that due to memory. So this is the idea. Maybe you've heard of this, but of course, the very first exposure to an infectious agent within about 2 weeks, so you see about 14 days, you've got a peak of immunoglobulin G, which is an antibody that binds specifically to the pathogen that you've been exposed to. And then the second part is, notice if you have, there's a little squiggly line there, maybe, many weeks or months later, all of a sudden you get exposed to the same virus again. Instead of it taking you 2 weeks to get a peak of response, it takes you like just several days, and all of a sudden you've got a massive response. So even just a day or two is really quick. That response can very much help you deal with that infection and clear it rapidly. So that's the whole point of why they're pushing vaccination. And it could make sense in certain circumstances. However, you want to think about, okay, well, how can I ramp up all those other areas of immunity and maintain also this area of immunity in such a way that it will function well? One thing that's important to note, just as we're looking at this slide, is that researchers have recently found that there's a significant, I wouldn't want to say similarity, but there's there are parts of the normal coronaviruses that cause the common cold that are similar to SARS-CoV-2. And so we actually have, many of us, some amount of memory present in us. So we are able to mount, if our immune system is functioning well, a response. However, the response, the claim is not necessarily as neutralizing it would be if we were targeting very specifically that spike protein. But it does give some element of memory, which could very well be helpful. So humoral immunity, as I mentioned, it's production of antibodies. They will combat the foreign molecule or whatever, the foreign antigen. Antigens are parts of those pathogens, the bad bacteria or bad virus, that are bound by this antibody. It's like a Y-shaped molecule that attaches. B cells are the lymphocytes that recognize antigens and make antibodies. They provide memory along with T cells too. So, and the dual nature of this adaptive immune system is it's not just antibodies. So antibodies are an important part, But the secondary part is the humoral, the cell-mediated immunity. So notice how I have cellular immunity, which is actually more important for virus-infected cells, because the virus is hiding inside a cell and the antibody can't hiding. So what has to happen? The antibody would have to get through the cell, and it can't because it's trying to, and it can't get at the virus. So what's going on? There's another way. The virus actually will be inside that cell hiding, but pieces of the virus will be presented on the surface, and now a T cell will come, and a T cell will come and say, "Uh-oh, there's something bad in there," and then destroy the cell. So this is a comparison of humoral and cellular immunity. I'm not going to go into detail of that. How you doing, Nwamiko? How are we for time? I know we're pretty much done.
Well, yeah, I'll jump in right there, and I'll say, while you are finished, your presentation is not at an end. That's the good news. So I want you to stick around for a second, because the information that you gave is really, really is really powerful, because this is basically the theory of how our body works. But now what we're going to transition to is we're going to transition to the practical aspect with another one of our guests, Mercy Ballard. And she is the founder of Years Restored Lifestyle Center. And she is also formerly a registered nurse, registered intravenous nurse. And she's actually a passionate practitioner of what she preaches. And so she's going to actually share some natural remedies with you, so you can basically apply some of the theory that Pekka was just sharing. Now, Pekka's not going away. He's going to be jumping in as well. But Mercy's going to start us off with what are some practical things that we can do to actually apply some of the principles that Pekka just shared with us.
Perfect. Okay. And that last slide, can you guys still hear me? The last slide just hopefully ties it in there. So I will stop my share and pass it on.
Mercy, are you there?
I'm here.
Awesome.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Thank you for the invite. Very excited to be here with you guys and share the practical things that we've been sharing for a while. Actually, since the corona started, that was, a couple of years ago, right? In March, we start practicing these principles because we have programs in our lifestyle centers. So we didn't want anything to happen when people are there in California. So we have them practice a lot of these principles. And also before they come to our program, we have them practice for 2 weeks. And we encourage everybody to continue doing this, because we want to be proactive to avoid issues. We can do so many things to be healthy in the worst conditions. And I believe that God has given us the best therapies ever, with the super healing foods. And these have been extremely efficient. So this is what we want to share with you. So I'm going to share my screen. Yeah.
Before you, as you prepare to share your screen, I just want to share a note with everyone that if anyone has any questions, they can enter them into the chat, and we're going to try to address your questions towards the end of the presentation. But Pekka, Dr. Maattanen will be standing by as well as you go through your presentation. If anybody has questions, I'll be looking out for questions. So feel free to put your questions in, and more information will be coming as we move forward. Go ahead. Oh, by the way, and Mercy's website for her ministry is yearsrestored.com. Yearsrestored.com. All yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully I can bring it easy. Okay, here it is. Okay, can you see it? You can see it, right? Okay, so here the super healing foods that we use. I have some studies that's showing, that these foods work in an amazing way. So garlic is one, the the main ones. Garlic is an active organosulfur compound. So that's the allicin, which is so powerful, especially for viral infection. So according to this study, it's gonna block the replication of the virus. So this is what we want, because when we have the virus, we wanna stop, especially the replication, because it can just grow by billions. So we want to avoid that. So garlic will do that. Then we have also as a prophylactic for virus, for widespread, according to this study. And let me see. Another important thing about garlic is because it has good amounts of quercetin. So that's another wonderful thing about garlic. And so this is specifically in this study about the COVID. For COVID, you have heard a lot about the quercetin is great, right? For the virus. So how do we do it? I'm not presenting so many studies. There is so many studies about how great it is for many things. And because, not just for this virus, but for the future pandemics and for cancer, for all these epidemics. So garlic is really, really a superfood for that. But I'm gonna show you how we use it. So the garlic we use is, we do 2 small garlics a day, and we do a juice of half a lemon and 4 ounces of warm water, and we just blend it. And we drink this every meal. So if you have the virus, or you're sick with COVID, so you're gonna drink this every meal. Okay, so we recommend 2 to 3 times a day. And so that will be a great way to stop the replication of the virus, which is what you want to do right away. And then we have the other super healing food is the onion. So the onion has it's very good source of quercetin again, which is very important for many things. In this study, it's a powerful anti-inflammatory. So onion, because of the good amounts of quercetin, is going to be very strong anti-inflammatory. So even though this study in a traumatic spinal cord injury in these mouse and these rats, that they recover well, faster. So imagine right now when we have these neurological issues happening with the spike protein. So what do? You have to give it large amounts of anti-inflammatory. So onion will be a good one to go by. Then we have here, it has immunomodulated effect also. So it's going to calm down when it's going too fast, right? When we have in an advanced stage of COVID, so it'll be great too. And then we have another study here that is going to inhibit the replication of the virus. So another thing is it's an anti-inflammatory and thrombin inhibitory action. So remember, we have clots forming, things like that. So that's gonna prevent it. So it's just an amazing food. So the way we do it is 3 cups of water and 1 cup of 3 cups of water with 1 onion. So you just cut it in half, and then you just mash about 5 cloves of garlic, and then just cook it with a little bit of salt for a good taste. You cook it for about 20 minutes, and this is super powerful. I have a little bit here, except I'm dealing with laryngitis, so I've been drinking this. So the more inflammation we have, the more of this we need to do. We put it in here that we can drink 1 cup twice a day. But if you're super sick, I will drink it more than that, as much as you can drink of this. You can hydrate yourself also with this drink and give yourself large amounts of anti-inflammatory. Then another thing we do with onion is a poultice. So it's 1 large onion. What we do is we chop it up in little squares, and we like to saute it. You can put a little water if you wish. I usually don't put any water. I just saute, dry saute. And then when it's warm and it's translucent, we put it in a towel, kitchen towel, just fold it and you put it in. Be careful that not to burn the patient, right? Put it in the chest and then cover with another towel for about an hour. Sometimes what you can do is also, you can also, sorry about that noise. Another thing is you can just leave it overnight if you cover it well. And we have, give me a second, sorry.
I don't see too many questions in the chat. While Mercy just steps away for a moment, this information is powerful, but please do send in your questions if you have them. Go ahead, Mercy.
Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so then we have the oregano. Oregano is so powerful, so antiviral, antifungal, antibacterial, whatever it is, whatever infection it is. But you know, in this case, we're talking about virus. So oregano is super powerful for that. It's anti-inflammatory. We want that effect because there is a lot of inflammation happening with the spike protein. So oregano is one of our favorites, and stop also the replication of the virus. So let's see, another study shows that eucalyptus also inhibit the replication of the virus. So we like to use both, combine both of them. So it's oregano and eucalyptus. So what we do is 8 cups of water. We put boiling water. We put 2 drops of oregano oil and about 6 drops of eucalyptus oil, and we do inhalation. So for us, this is the best therapy you can ever have. It's the single more effective therapy. Somebody was asking in our Missionary YouTube, what is the single more effective treatment? I would say this will be the one. And so we do the inhalation, and we do about 5 minutes, just deep breathing. So what we do, we just boil water in the stove, add the drops of the oils, and then just lift up the lid and just go and just smell. You can put a towel if you want, whatever way it works, as long as you can, breathe in this. So what it does is the heat, heat, virus cannot survive heat. Another thing is also the steam. It's really good to get rid of virus. And on top of that, you have the oregano and the eucalyptus, which are super anti-inflammatories and also antivirus. So there was one lady that sent me a message, and my husband is really sick. And I say, is she following our protocol? She said, yes. Okay, so how many times is he doing the inhalation? And he said 3 times a week. Well, that's not going to work. I said, have him do, because he was very sick, a lot of cough. The cough wasn't getting any better. So I said, have him do it every hour. So he was doing every hour, and then the next day she sent me a message. Okay, he's much better. I mean, this can turn around things even the next day, by the next day. If you do, for these treatments, you have to be very, very consistent, because the more consistent and you are, you're going to get better really fast. It really doesn't take that long if you apply all these principles and all these therapies. So that's what we do with that treatment. Another thing that's very important is do gargles. So what we do is something so simple: 1 glass of water with, and we put 1 drop of oregano oil. That's it. And then what we do is we just gargle it. So what I tell everybody is keep it in the bathroom. So every time you go to the bathroom, just gargle it, day and night. Just gargle it, because you want to stop the replication in your throat, right, of the virus. So this has been also pretty effective. And another thing we do is a charcoal. Charcoal is supposed to decrease the toxicity, right? Because when we have a lot of inflammation, a lot of toxins, things like that, and charcoal is powerful for that. So the way we do it is 1 tablespoon of charcoal with 8 ounces of water, and we drink it at bedtime. So we do that every night. And then we have another powerful anti-inflammatory. According to these studies, and it's also antioxidant, anti-diabetic, anti-cancer, anti-inflammatory, protecting the heart, the liver. It's just powerful. So the limonene is another thing is increase in mucus production, I guess, to help, right, with the inflammation. So the way we do it is you can find the limonene in the organic lemon and orange peel. So what we do is we put one by 1 inch of the lemon or orange peel into our smoothie in the morning, and we just drink it that way. But when somebody's super sick, I will just put the whole lemon. It has to be organic, so I will cut it in pieces, just in 4 pieces, and just throw it into the smoothie, or just throw it with maybe orange juice and put a little honey, blend it, and just drink it. Make it so powerful to decrease inflammation. So that will be something great. Another thing that we keep listening, right, is about zinc. Zinc is very important to resist the virus and decrease inflammation. Everything is about inflammation. If you can decrease inflammation, control it, then you're going to be okay. So the faster you do it, the faster you're going to beat it. And this can happen in 2 days. People, we've been helping hundreds and hundreds of people in different parts, different countries. And they always said in 2 days, they're feeling like amazingly much better. And so they out of the crisis in 2 days. And some people have been extremely sick, but they're still feeling much better in a couple of days. Now, zinc, you can eat too much. If you have zinc toxicity, you're going to have depletion of copper. So that's why we want to do everything through foods, because the way God created is the best way we can ever have, right? So that's why we do everything through foods, not even supplements at our lifestyle center. So the zinc is very powerful anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. So let's see. So where do we find the zinc? The zinc we find in pumpkin, in squash, cashew, sunflower, flaxseed, beans, lentils, all the foods that we're supposed to be eating, these plant-based foods, quinoa, avocado, almonds, sesame seeds. So if we'll be eating well, we will not be depleted on zinc, which is a powerful anti-inflammatory that's going to help us fight the disease. Another thing is vitamin C. So the vitamin C also helps fighting the pneumonia. So very important to have good amounts of vitamin C in our body. Also it's a very good prophylactic for COVID-19 according to this study. So where do we find the vitamin C? We're going to find it in acerola cherries, guavas, bell pepper, kiwi, strawberries, oranges, papaya. So what we do is we make a blend of these foods, high vitamin C foods, and then we give them as a smoothie. So in that way, the people have these large amounts of vitamin C to beat the disease. Actually, Dr. Song was telling us this story. She brought a friend from her house, from the friend's house to her house. And she did that. We were talking about when we were flying back from a conference, and now we're talking about, okay, you had to do this, give it a lot of this. And she did give her, a blend of all these fruits, because she was telling me, she doesn't eat anything raw, how depleted she is and all these vitamins, right? So she did that. She did an incredible comeback. This lady was going to die, but she did an incredible comeback in just 2 days. She was like a new person in 2 days. So these foods are so important to do, and so simple also. Then we have the NAC, right? That everybody's heard about the NAC. That's so an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. So this is to help people to prevent from going to, getting ventilators, right? So there is a lot of studies that show about that especially in COVID-19. let's see. So where do we find the NAC in foods? So you can find in the allium plants. So those will be the onion, shallots, chives, spring onions, and leeks and things like that. So these are the sources of the NAC. So we just have to eat a large amounts of this, and we should be covered. Now, another thing that's very important is the dandelion. Dandelion is an antimicrobial, antiviral effects, and it has lately we've been using a lot of dandelion for different conditions. It's been like amazing. The results are just incredible. When nothing works, we added the dandelion and people start turning around. And the reason is because the dandelion is gonna help stimulate the glutathione in the body, which is one of the most powerful detoxifier of the body. So the glutathione. So this is, so we like to use it as a tea. So we do 1 to 2 tablespoons of dandelion leaf. According to the study, the leaf is better than the root. A lot of people think that always the root is better, not in this case. In this case, the study showed that it was the leaf. So we put in 1 cup of hot water, then you strain it, 1 scoop, and then you drink it. And lately, what we've been doing something even more drastic, because if we want to improve fast and if we want to beat it, somebody that has less chance to survive because they haven't been having a good lifestyle. So we do an enemas. The enemas have been like an amazing change. People that have super high fever, finally the enemas help beating the high fever that people go on and on and on and not stop. So what we do is the onion, 1 onion, 5 garlics, 3 cups of water, and 2 tablespoons dandelion. So we just make a tea out of it, and then we strain it, and we give it 2 cups of that as an enema, and that's gonna be amazing. We have really, really incredible testimonies from enemas. There was this lady that was in the hospital, and the daughter gave it this enema. I don't know how she did it, but in the hospital, nobody interrupted her because she was praying that God, will protect her. But anyhow, the mom that was so very drowsy, wasn't responding well, she was septic, and 2 days she went home and she was fine. So these things are just amazingly powerful. And of course, we like the hydrotherapies, right? Because as Dr. Pekka was talking, that these are very, very important. He likes the sauna. That's our favorite too. For me, saunas are the best. And so we cannot, because I believe that these treatments should be available any part of the world, right? It shouldn't be just for people that have money, have their own sauna, things like that. So we tell them to do a sauna like this one. Here's my friend, Dr. Joyce. We did a picture with her. So what we do is you put a stool, and then you put a big pot of water, boiling water, and you put some drops of oregano and eucalyptus, and then you just cover yourself. So what we have here is a sheet, a plastic, and a blanket. And then you just cover yourself. You're gonna sweat better than any sauna, because the saunas that we have here, I have a fancy sauna for a lifestyle center. These work better, I'm telling you. So, but it's so great that anybody can do this, any part of the world, right? So these are very good. It's gonna make you sweat. As long as you sweat well for 10 minutes, that's all you need. And then you always finish with a cold shower, every therapy. So you just cover yourself. So I'm almost done, I believe. So here is the recipe for the sauna. And okay, and the last thing I just want to say, we tell everybody, you have to go on the plant-based, because people call us from all over the world that they eat whatever, right? And I say, okay, do whatever you can, but don't eat meat, just eat plant-based. That's all we can tell them, because as long as you're eating meat, you're not going to recover, because the microbiome is so important, right? The microbiome has to be in the right, you want to have more beneficial bacteria than pathogenic bacteria, because virus is part of the microbiome. So you want to beat it. So eating meat is not going to help, because the meat is going to have the pathogenic bacteria be in larger proportions, which we don't want it in that case. So according to this study, the plant-based is what's going to balance the microbiome. So I know a lot of people are going to ask about the information, and we can have maybe somebody put in our website is medmissionary.com, so anybody can go there and just download it or make copies.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Such powerful information, absolutely exciting information. We did have a couple quick questions. One of the questions that came in, we can get them while we're hot here, was, can we use fresh oregano leaves for teas for prevention? So can somebody use?
Great question, because in other countries they don't have the essential oils. I know for sure, because I'm from Peru, and then hardly can find those. Yeah, absolutely. You just have to use a handful of oregano, throw it in the pot, and just boil it, and it's gonna work as well. Same thing for the sauna, the homemade sauna. Just put a good amount of that, make a boil, and just it's gonna be as good. Yeah.
Okay. The other question I had was, is it possible to use, let's see, does charcoal cause constipation?
Charcoal can cause constipation if you're not drinking enough water. When you're sick, especially with viral infection, you have to drink a lot of water. So I will drink a little extra, especially if you have fever, you have to double your amount, your intake of water. That's why you do your water, you do your teas, and it shouldn't be a problem, unless you suffer of other conditions, that your peristalsis is decreased, that your bowels are not moving, and you suffer constipation all your life. That's a different thing. So in that case, I will use 1 teaspoon instead 1 tablespoon.
Okay. One other question back on the oregano and eucalyptus was, can that treatment be ingested? Can somebody drink the eucalyptus oregano mix as opposed to just inhaling it?
We don't recommend any essential oils internally, because they're so strong, and the lining of the digestive system is only one layer, so it can cause issues also. So we'd rather to drink the onion and the garlic and all that instead, but the other one is just through inhalation to sauna.
Awesome. Well, we did have some more questions, but I'm going to get to more of those questions towards the end because they spread off into broader topics. But we did have one more guest, and that was Dr. Joyce Choe. And she's also a partner with Mercy at Medical Missionary at the Lifestyle Center, and with the Medical Missionary Ministry. And Dr. Joyce Choe, I mispronounced it. Dr. Joyce Choe is a certified medical doctor, as well as she has a master's in public health, and she's a board certified ophthalmologist, and she's been in practice for almost 20 years. I had the chance to meet both her and Mercy last year, doing what they do, preaching and practicing what they preach. And she has a deep interest in the Adventist health message, and is the co-founder of Medical Missionary, medmissionary.com, the ministry that Mercy was just sharing with us there. So she has some information she's going to be sharing with us, and I know you'll be blessed. There'll be a little bit more question time at the end, so keep those questions coming, and enjoy the presentation. All yours, Dr. Choe.
Thank you, Nwamiko. Okay, so I am going to share my screen. Thank you, Mercy. Thank you, Dr. Pekka. And want to welcome everybody. Let me see a slideshow from the beginning. And today we have entitled this whole thing, Preparing for Pandemics, Is God's Health Message Powerful Enough for COVID? And the reason that we wanted to talk about this subject is because this seems to be the question why we are going through this period of time where we are being mandated to accept certain therapies. And this is a very confusing time for the Seventh-day Adventist Church as to what it means to be practicing the health message. And there are many people in the Seventh-day Adventist Church who believe that it is part of God's health message to be accepting of the mandates. And there are people who believe that to do this would be something that would defile their bodies and that they cannot do this in good conscience. And so we want to talk about God's health message today. And is God's health message powerful enough? Now, I want to address this question of, is it something that the Bible asks us to do? Should we prepare for pestilences? And I think that this is a relevant question. When Jesus was on this earth and his disciples were asking him, hey, how will we know that you are coming soon? And his answer was, for nation shall rise against nation and kingdoms against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. And so Jesus was letting his disciples know that we should expect pestilences. We should expect difficult times. And so, it's really interesting. In 1918, we had one of the worst worldwide pestilences that had ever hit this earth, and it was the Spanish flu. It's the reason why so many people are afraid of what is happening right now. And during that period of time, anywhere from 25 to 50 million people perished. In the United States itself, about 500 to 600,000 Americans passed. And at that time, we know that Seventh-day Adventists were practicing the health message. And Dr. Rubel, who was head of the General Conference Health Ministry Department, he collected data from 10 sanitariums that had been helping over 1,000 people during that period of time. And they found that the mortality rate was less than 1%. Just by practicing hydrotherapy and natural remedies, their death rate was extremely low. And we see this in many of our Adventist schools. There were 3 or 4 Adventist schools that had large outbreaks of the Spanish flu, and there was only 1 death with over 200 students that were affected. And so during this time, there were no drugs that were administered that we're aware of. It was hydrotherapy, natural remedies, and diet. And
Dr. Choe?
Yes.
Just wanted to let you know we're seeing your slides in presenter mode. If you
You're seeing my slides in presenter mode. Okay.
Yeah, we're seeing. Yeah, you could.
Let me share this. Let me share this again here.
Okay.
Let's see, from current slide. How's that? Is that better?
Perfect. That's perfect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move here. This is what Dr. Rubel said. He wrote in one of our publications. What shall Seventh-day Adventists do to be ready to minister to the sick and distressed in such a time? We have known from Bible teachings for many years that such times were coming. We have been told over and over again to prepare for these experiences by well-ordered lives and by securing such a preparation for service as would enable all our people. So according to Dr. Rubel, it would be very good for Seventh-day Adventists to prepare, and we should have known that these things were going to come. And it's really sobering that he said that during this epidemic, every Seventh-day Adventist has had 10 times as many opportunities for service as he could fill if he had been ready for them. What a chance for missionary endeavor and for practicing that pure religion and undefiled of which James speaks. Some, however, have been so fearful of contracting the disease that they have refrained from offering assistance to the distressed until the disease actually invaded their own families, while others have exceeded their strength in ministry to the sick. And I think that you would agree with me that we are seeing the same thing happening during the COVID pandemic, that there are some people who are courageous enough to help people. Mercy was telling you about our friend, Dr. Margaret Song, and how she is ministering to people. But most people are afraid. They're afraid to even leave their homes, and they're afraid to interact with other people outside, let alone going to church. And this is something that if we look back at history, we can see that Seventh-day Adventists, in the time of another pandemic that was even deadlier than this, that they had courage to go out. And how is it that they had that courage? It is because they knew that God promised us all that we need. Here in 3 John 2, it says that, beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. God wants us to be in good health. And then he says this, he says, I'll give you everything necessary for it, according as his divine power hath given unto us all things that pertain unto life and godliness, through the knowledge of him that hath called us to glory and virtue. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3. So I hope that this gives our people courage that God has promises for us, not only in health and in happy times, but also in times of need. This is a real interesting quote here. It says this, the Lord has been pleased to present this matter before me in clear lines. Fever cases need not be treated with drugs. And so I want to let you know this quote here. This quote is saying that Seventh-day Adventists should know how to treat fever without drugs. And the other thing that this quote is saying is this, is where I underlined, the most difficult cases are best and most successfully managed by nature's own resources. That's something that is something we've been seeing this in COVID, where people are so afraid of this, and yet we are seeing that the simplest natural remedies are what helps our most difficult cases. Mercy was telling you about this lady who was in the hospital with sepsis, and her white blood cell count was climbing with all these antibiotics. And it was not until her daughter prayed and had the courage to give her mother onion broth enemas, that after 2 days of onion broth enemas, her sepsis finally was cleared. She had a white blood cell of 11,000 when she was sent home to her family. And this quote goes on to say, this science fully adopted will bring the best results. So this is another thing. We have to fully adopt God's ways. Some people are doing a little bit of the world's ways, a little bit of God's ways. We'll eat a little bit of meat here. We'll do that. It does not work that way. And we have seen that with people who try to adopt our cookbook. They will just do a few recipes here and there. They're not going to get good health until they implement all the principles. It says, the Lord will bless the physician who depends on natural methods, helping every function of the human machinery to act in its own strength, the part the Lord designed it to act in restoring itself to proper action. And we have seen this time and time again. I will tell you the story of my dentist. I tell this every time because it's so powerful to me. My dentist, I got a call from from his office saying that he couldn't see me on Monday because he had just had a stroke. And he called me on Sunday and he shared with me that his vision had been affected. I went to see him on Sunday evening at his home, and I saw that, he had the sixth nerve of his left eye was affected, and so he couldn't bring it out this way, and so he had crossed eyes a little bit, and he couldn't use both eyes together, and he had difficulty with balance. And so he'd been in the hospital for 3 days, and he'd been out for a day. And so when I talked with him, I shared with him about our diet, and I told him, I said, you have very little time for you to make changes so that you can get your health back. And if you don't get it back very quickly, this will most likely be more and more permanent. And so he was motivated to try. So he tried doing our diet. And the next day he called me and he said, Joyce, he said, I am 90% better, 90% better. And I know that this is a miracle by the Lord, because as we are working with the Lord, implementing these natural remedies, and we have the faith to share them with other people, God has been blessing. The reason I wanted to share this is that many of our Seventh-day Adventist people are falling prey to COVID. And this is causing a lot of doubt and skepticism in people who, up to this point, have really believed in the health message and have really promoted the health message. And so these same people are now asking this question. The question I have for you, this is something I got off of Facebook, is why are people that follow the health message succumbing to COVID? And this is a person who is saying, because all these people who are Seventh-day Adventists, who are supposedly following the health message, are succumbing to COVID, she was saying, this is a reason why we need these mandates. And so we really, really have to address this. There are many of you who are watching today who might have the same questions, or who may be struggling with health issues yourself. And we want to share with you how it is we are going to make it, not only through COVID, but through pestilences that are going to come upon us that are even worse than COVID. Now, we know this from what we've seen about COVID, that those who succumb to COVID many times have other comorbidities or other diseases like high blood pressure, hyperlipidemia, diabetes, cancer, lots of different things that people can have. And so we understand that, for us to treat this successfully, we need to have a multifaceted approach. We can't just look at one therapy. We can't just look at one herb. What they're trying to do with one medication or one vaccine is not going to work, because this is a very complex situation that we are going into, and we're dealing with inflammation. We see that with not only the disease itself, but we see that with the therapies, that the therapies are inducing inflammation. So the key is decrease inflammatory triggers, decrease toxin exposure, detoxify, and I believe that diet is the key. So I want to share with you this, that in the beginning, we're all familiar with what the original diet was that God gave to us. God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the whole earth, every tree that has fruit in it, they will be yours for fruit. And it was grains, fruit, seeds, and nuts. And we also know that after sin came into the world, that was when we were told that we need to eat the herb of the field. So we needed to eat greens. Okay, now I'm sharing this with you also from the spirit of prophecy, that grains, fruits, nuts, and vegetables constitute the diet chosen for us by our Creator. So isn't this a wonderful and a beautiful thought, that God cared so much about us that He didn't leave it to us to try to figure it out for ourselves what we needed to eat. He picked these foods out for us. And they're going to impart a strength, a power of endurance, and a vigor of intellect that are not afforded by a more complex and stimulating diet. She also says that flesh was never the best food, is now doubly objectionable since disease in animals is so rapidly increasing. She says that people who are continually eating flesh that is filled with TB or tuberculosis and cancerous germs, and we see now that tuberculosis, cancer, and other fatal diseases are thus communicated. The animals are diseased, and by partaking of their flesh, we plant the seeds of disease in our own tissue and blood. Then when exposed to the changes in malarious atmosphere, these are more sensibly felt. Also, when we are exposed to prevailing epidemics and contagious diseases, the system is not in a condition to resist the disease. So many of us may think, well, I'm pretty safe and pretty healthy. I exercise and I'm not overweight, and I've never caught, too many really bad illnesses in my life. But friends, we're going into a very, very difficult time. And I think that we are going to have to think a lot differently. We don't want to wait until we get sick to make changes. We want to, number one, value our health. And number two, I think we want to get to a point where we love the Lord so much, where we trust what he has to say, that we would obey him, even if we can't see exactly why we should do so. Some people are waiting until the data catches up, or the science catches up. And I think, we want to get to the point where we trust and obey. Getting through the time of the end is all going to be about a relationship with Jesus. And that has to do with trust. She says here that the liability to take disease is increased tenfold by meat eating. Okay. I'm sharing this with you today because I have taken it for granted all this time that our watchers and our viewers are people who believe in the word of God, as well as in the spirit of prophecy, which is what we believe Ellen White, her gift to us is. And I have found out that that is not exactly the case, that there are many people who are still doubtful about this. And so I just want to share with you, you will put yourself at risk to keep on doing this, not only because physically you are doing something that is working against the laws of your being, but because spiritually you do not have the connection with Jesus to just trust and obey his word. And so this is why we want to share this with you. Now, we are finding that the science is supporting this. Look at this research from the British Medical Journal of Nutrition, Prevention and Health. This was a survey of 2,884 doctors and nurses who were exposed to the COVID-19 patients. They found that amongst these doctors and nurses, that those who are plant-based had a 73% lower risk of developing moderate to severe COVID-19. Those who were eating fish had a 59% lower risk. Those who were on a ketogenic diet, and this is a diet that is high in fat and protein and typically mostly meat, they had a 48% greater risk of developing moderate to severe COVID-19. So isn't that amazing? Just by your diet, you can greatly increase or decrease your risk of developing this disease. And it makes sense because any disease that you get, you're going to be much more at risk of depending upon your inflammation and underlying inflammation. That's why so many people who have underlying disease are much more at risk of COVID. So what we recommend people do is that they eat to heal their gut. The reason is because 70 to 80% of your immune system lives in the gut. And so it makes sense that you want to eat to keep that gut healthy. Now, many of us are not going to know when our guts are happy or unhappy. And so you want to look at other things. You can get food sensitivity testing, or you could test it in other ways. You can see how your other symptoms do. Some of us have joint pain and eczema and some of these other things that we may not realize are associated with food sensitivities. Even something like GERD or acid reflux can have to do with many times gluten sensitivity. So try an elimination diet, avoid inflammatory foods, avoid foods that you know are high risk GMO, like for instance, corn and soy. These are all high risk GMO. Over 90% of corn and soy is high risk GMO. We do not include it in our cookbook or in our protocol. And we also teach people to avoid foods that are going to be sprayed with Roundup or glyphosate, which is an antibiotic. It is a mineral chelator or a mineral binder, as well as an herbicide. And we also teach people to avoid gluten, which was engineered a little differently sometime in the 1960s or 70s. And so it is a much different plant than it was when our parents were growing up. We found that that is also very helpful. And, one meal can totally change your inflammatory status. And so I found that people who were doing better as far as COVID was concerned, they might eat something, and then all of a sudden they find, oh, I'm doing so much worse. They take a downturn, and you find they ate something that was inflammatory and they didn't realize it. We have them avoid additives and preservatives. So that's going to be pretty much all your packaged and processed foods. And if you're sick, we also ask you to avoid grains and nuts. because these take a lot more to digest. Every time you eat food, it takes a lot of energy for your body. And so all of the resources of your body that could go to fighting disease will have to go to digesting your food. And so that's why in our cookbook, we also include guidelines of how to eat. Okay, so here are some popular packaged and processed foods. These are very popular for Seventh-day Adventists as well. You know, you have your veggie artificial meats, you have pastas and pizzas, you have veganace, you have fake cheese and you know, fake butter. And this is a thing, you know, the Bible says that we are supposed to think about whatsoever things are true. And I think that we have to take it all the way through to its final end. You don't want to be thinking thoughts that are true and then like trying to fool your taste buds into believing you're eating something that you're not. You know, it's like, do you really want your body to want to crave meat? Or do you just want to say, you know, I believe that when I go to heaven, I'm going to love these animals and I'm not going to use them for consumption. And so I might as well start here, especially since I know that it's better for my health. And, you know, this is what God is calling us to at this time. So I would just highly recommend, if you have these kinds of things, there are other ways that we can eat that we don't need to be putting into ourselves ingredients like these. These are the ingredients of some of the foods that I showed you on the last slide. And you can see many of them are food isolates. They're not like whole foods. They're like just parts of foods, and they're flavor enhancers. And they're things that are going to excite your neurons to death and cause inflammation and damage. And I know, as somebody who has suffered from many food sensitivities, that it's really hard to think like one ingredient, a tiny little ingredient, could cause so much inflammation. But it's because one tiny little ingredient induces an immune response. And an immune response, it's an overwhelming response of the body to any one thing. It's like when you have an allergic reaction to grass. I mean, you should be able to tolerate grass, you know, but your immune system goes crazy. And so this is what has happened because of all of the chemicals and things that have been in our environment for the last couple hundred years that are increasing only. Now, here are other high-risk foods. And these I put here because these are things that, you know, we all kind of have an idea they're not the best for us, but we'll cheat. Every once in a while, we'll cheat. And I think that this is a biblical principle that we want to apply. You know, how many of you would believe that you should live in victory every day, but it's okay one day for you to cheat? You know, how long would a marriage last if you believed that way? And some of us are very careless about our food because I think we think that, you know, our spirituality extends everywhere except for in our diet. And, you know, it couldn't be anything further from the truth. For us to live healthy and make it through pestilence, this is going to be a supernatural thing that we can only accomplish by the grace of God and having a relationship with him. And this is something that I found through my own health journey. It's like, sometimes I don't know what to eat because I got sensitive to so many things, and I have to pray and ask the Lord for wisdom and for guidance about how to go through things. Now, here's a quote from Temperance, the book Temperance. It says, Satan gathered the fallen angels together to devise some way of doing the most possible evil to the human family. One proposition after another was made, till finally Satan himself thought of a plan. He would take the fruit of the vine, also the wheat and other things given by God as food, and would convert them into poisons, which would ruin man's physical, mental, and moral powers, and so overcome the senses that Satan should have full control. I think that a lot of times people think that, you know, the health message is just, I eat fruits and vegetables and that's it, you know, or I eat vegan. And so as long as it's not from meat, I can eat pretty much whatever I want. And, you know, Satan is working around the clock to make it so that he can injure as many of God's people as he can and cause major confusion. Because when God's people get sick, they all get confused. They're like, why am I sick while I am on God's health plan? And so I'm trying to help us understand that God's health plan has to be progressive. It was given to us about 150 years ago. And, you know, a lot has happened in that 150 years. We have to take the principles that were given to us and then make decisions as we see things happen in the world. And we are seeing a lot of things happen in the world with agriculture and the chemicals, the 2,000 chemicals that are introduced into the environment every year and all of these things. So here are some other foods that are high risk that you wouldn't think of as being high risk because they're typically thought of as being healthy foods. And the reason that they're high risk is because they're genetically modified, some of them have high levels of glyphosate that have been sprayed upon them. Some of them have a lot of excitotoxins in them, like flavor enhancers and this type of thing. And so, you know, we have to think a lot differently about food. So what we recommend is that people eat a plant-based diet that has mostly organic ingredients, that is high nutrition, 2 meals a day so that you give your body as much time to rest as possible, no more than 3, 5 hours between meals because you give your body about 4 hours to digest your food and then 1 hour to rest. We eat our fruits and our vegetables at different meals because they digest at different rates. And this way you will have less risk of fermentation. We don't recommend that you add any free fats. So no olive oil, no coconut oil, or these types of things. We get all of our fats from the food. And I've been eating this way since 2016 and eating quite comfortably this way. And you will find that as you adopt more and more of these principles, you'll have so much more energy because your body doesn't have to take so much time to digest, and it's going to help with many different health conditions as well. We use real salt in moderation, so it's not a no salt diet. We don't use any condiments like ketchup and mustard and fake cheese and this kind of thing. We recommend 70% raw, 30% cooked. And we soak and sprout our seeds, grains, nuts, legumes to decrease lectins and to increase nutrient availability. And so you might be wondering, what does it look like to soak and sprout? You know, so this is a picture that shows some things that are soaking and or these are sprouting. You can see the actual sprouts, but we soak our seeds, grains, legumes for about 8 to 12 hours at night. And then we sprout it for the same amount of time. And then we're ready to use it. And we find that it not only increases antioxidant activity, like for here, you can see that the antioxidant activity of mung beans increased almost 12 times for the mung bean and twice for the radish. So you can see it's significant how much antioxidant activity, but it also increases mineral and nutrient availability, like iron and zinc availability can increase about 30 to 50%. That's incredible just by soaking and sprouting. So this can have a tremendous impact on your health. So we're very, very consistent with it. We sprout our pseudograins, which are buckwheat, quinoa, amaranth, and quinoa. We also sprout the seeds that we use, like the sunflower seeds and the pumpkin seeds, the legumes like lentils, mung beans, navy beans, peas, pinto beans, whatever kind of beans you want to use. We also soak and sprout nuts and grains when we reincorporate them into the diet. So if you're sick, I would highly recommend that you not use nuts or grains because it's harder on your digestive system. And you want to be very smart about this. You want to give your body every opportunity, every resource to use to heal. And so be very easy on the digestive system when you get sick. Now, this is something that we were instructed upon in Ministry of Healing, that grains used for porridge or mush should have several hours of cooking. So Seventh-day Adventists should know that if you're going to use grains, they need to be cooked for a long period of time. A lot of people got into this raw food thing and they're doing like overnight oats. And so they'll just soak their oats overnight, blend them up, and then they'll eat them. And that is not according to our counsel. It's not according to the laws of our being. It will cause injury. Also, soft or liquid foods are less wholesome than dry foods, which require thorough mastication. So you don't want to be eating a whole lot of mushy and soupy things. You want to be eating things that require you to chew. Now, how effective is this? You know, a lot of things that I'm saying are so simple. People are like, huh, how could that be doing anything? You know, how is that, you know, better than drugs? You know, I'm going to share with you a story, okay? So I got permission from Lucas's mother to share his story and some of his pictures. This is Lucas. Lucas is a beautiful boy. He was born with a few issues, but nothing really severe. But it wasn't until he was around 9 months that he was diagnosed with having eosinophilic esophagitis, which is a condition that affects many older people. They get a lot of food sensitivities. They have a lot of inflammation in the esophagus, which is the tube that connects the mouth to the stomach. And it was not really known that much until in the recent years, when so many people have been developing food sensitivities, immune system issues, and that kind of thing. Now, Lucas was a small child at birth. At 2 months, he developed severe eczema. At 4 months, he developed severe diarrhea. At 6 months, he developed severe vomiting, up to the point that he was having diarrhea and vomiting up to 30 times a day. So you can imagine, you know, how difficult it would have been for a family to take care of a child who was this sick. And you know what happens at 2, 4, and 6 months. This happened at the time of his pediatric visits where he got injections. Now, he was hospitalized at 9 months and diagnosed with eosinophilic esophagitis. I'm going to just show you some pictures of what he looked like when he would eat certain, or his mother would eat certain foods and breastfeed. And, you know, a lot of these food sensitivities do not show up right away. They might show up, you know, anywhere from minutes, hours to even a few days after the food. He would get this rash, this eczema, and you can see the eczema was quite severe. And he was given all kinds of therapies, including not only topical steroids, but even steroids to take by mouth. Now, when he was on steroids, he was looking pretty good. On the days that he was not on the steroids, you can see how severe the eczema was. And after some time, they noticed that the steroids weren't working and seemed to actually be causing more issues. And so he was taken off of them. And you can see how serious this was. Now, when he was 2.5 years old, he was rehospitalized. And the reason for that was because there were people that cared about the family that thought that maybe they were being too health conscious, and they didn't understand what it was like to have a baby who was having diarrhea and vomiting 30 times a day. And they could not understand how a child could be so sick. Because of course, if he was, you know, taking the right drugs, that he would be okay. So they hospitalized him. They had Child Protective Services come and cause that to happen. And I just want to share with you, you know, just, you know, we doctors are not trained as to, or when I was going through things, I was not really trained as to when to report to Child Protective Services or what happens to families after they're reported to Child Protective Services. What happens is that, you know, when you are reported to Child Protective Services, you are considered guilty until you are cleared. And this is what happened to this family. Fortunately, God bless them, that the doctor who worked with them finally, you know, understood what was happening and believed them. And she let them go home after they had tried all kinds of things, including putting a nasogastric tube down and feeding the child 24 hours a day, including putting IV fluids, IV feeding formula through his veins, a TPN. And you can see that all of this just really, really broke him down. And his skin just ballooned. The child, you know, the family really feared for his life. And when he went home, he was sent home on the condition that he would have to eat infant formula, even though the families, you know, kept letting the medical team know that he was sensitive to all infant formulas, that none of them had worked. But because they had to do something, you know, they were sent home with this. at the risk of losing their child if he did not continue to improve. Fortunately, they had been in touch with Mercy, and they were already in the midst of changing the child's diet. He was, prior to this, eating things like corn chips and avocado because he couldn't tolerate that many foods. And so they were in the midst of changing the diet. Mercy was helping them to find foods that he could enjoy, like waffles made out of sprouted buckwheat and sunflower seeds, and breads made with quinoa and chia seed, and with coconut puddings, and with lentil and quinoa crackers. And so she was helping them to find things that the child could eat. She was also helping them to do natural remedies like enemas, and they found that the garlic and onion enema really helped with decreasing the diarrhea and the vomiting. And they added an infant formula after he was released from his hospitalization that had sprouted cooked mung beans, sprouted cooked quinoa, and sprouted cooked buckwheat, as well as some coconut meat and coconut water. And doing this, as well as the garlic and onion broth and aloe vera and some of these things, this child healed. And you can see that he started, his skin cleared up. And this was him last year. He's a very good runner now. At 2.5, he couldn't walk, and he's running. And what a blessing it is to see people being given back their lives when things appear to be so hopeless. I just wanted to share that with you because we are going into a time when people feel that things are very hopeless and they're so afraid, they don't know what to do. And we have so many serious unexplainable diseases that are happening and will continue to happen. I want to share with you that God has a way. And the spirit of prophecy told us years ago that we shall soon reach a time when we must understand the meaning of a simple diet. The time is not far hence when we shall be obliged to adopt a diet very different from our present diet. And this was written in 1905. This is over 100 years ago. And I do believe that we have reached that time where we should embrace that simplicity and ask God to give us new taste buds. Because the prophet Joel also prophesied about a time when the field would be wasted, the land would mourn, for the corn is wasted, the new wine is dried up, the oil languisheth, the wheat and for the barley, because the harvest of the field is perished and the seed is rotten under their clods. We're living at a time when people are worried about the seed and seed quality, where people are worried about plants and plant quality for all the herbicides and all the lack of nutrition and all the genetic modification. And yet the Bible says that even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. And it is during this time that as we walk through this valley of the shadow of death, that God promises to prepare a table before us in the presence of our enemies. And surely goodness and mercy will follow us all the days of our lives. The spirit of prophecy says that natural means used in accordance with God's will bring about supernatural results. We ask for a miracle and the Lord directs the mind to some simple remedy. We ask to be kept from the pestilence that walketh in darkness, that is stalking with such power through the world. We are then to cooperate with God, observing the laws of health and life. So I just want to encourage everybody as we are going through these difficult times to purpose in your heart, to stay faithful to Jesus, to know that his ways are more powerful than anything that is in the world. They will be corroborated by science when it catches up. And we are to cooperate with God. He will bless the efforts that we have using these natural means with supernatural results.
Thank you so much, Dr. Choe. That was awesome. That was powerful. That was informative. That was spiritually a blessing. That was encouraging. And I hope it was for everybody that is on the stream right now watching. Before anybody goes away, I know that we have a few more questions that I'd like to share with our presenters. One question we did have was if our presenters would be willing to share their presentations on the Health and Liberty Facebook page. So if that is okay with you, please let us know, indicate in the chat, or just let us know here on stream if that's possible. But I'd like to invite Mercy and maybe Pekka as well to jump back on the stream here. I did have another question from YouTube, and one question was from Kevin on the Missionary YouTube channel, and he's asking if onion and garlic fermented is okay to be used. And I guess, Mercy, you can address that.
Yeah, we don't use fermented products at all of any type. Okay. We just want to be faithful following the counsel that we're not supposed to eat fermented foods. And, one of the reasons is because when you ferment things, you grow the bad and the good. So it's going to be pathogenic bacteria. It's going to be also beneficial. So it's going to be something good, but also something bad. And we want to be sure that everything that we do, that we put in our body, is going to glorify God and it's going to be the cleanest foods that we can have.
Ron Meinhardt has a really good series on YouTube about fermenting foods. And he talks about how when we ferment, you produce homo fermenters, which leave the environment in the state that it, a healthy state, and then hetero fermenters, including alcohol that is produced. And so when you ferment, a lot of times, not only are you producing these good bacteria, but you're producing that alcohol. We don't want to have any alcohol in the system. That's why we eat with fruits at one meal, vegetables at another meal. We don't snack. We are very careful about our food combinations and that type of thing.
All right, awesome. I have another question that is kind of a little bit of a deeper question, so you may or may not want to address this one, but a gentleman from the channel has asked the question if it's safe to use charcoal with water when you're on antipsychotic injections, specifically for schizophrenia. So if someone's on antipsychotic injections and they want to take charcoal with water, would you recommend them doing so?
Well, charcoal is okay. You just have to take it like 2 to 3 hours, apart from the medications, whatever medication it is. So you don't want to take it at the same time.
Okay, very good, very good. I don't see any more other questions, but if the presentations are going to be shared, please go ahead and send those on the other link that we have. There is another question from Angel Sky on the channel, and it says here, how do you do the onion garlic broth enema? And what's the recipe for the onion garlic broth enema? So how do you, I think the question is, how do you apply the onion broth enema?
Well, you have to buy this bag, right? There's a bag for enemas. So you just do the tea the regular way you do with the recipe that we have there. So once it's warm, you don't want to do enema when the liquid is hot or cold. So you just pour it into the bag, as simple as that, and just seal it up. You have to put it, it has to be by gravity. And then it has a tube, and at the end, it has a tip that you insert rectally. And then you just open up the valve, and then you just let the water go all the way. You can watch that in YouTube. People do with coffee enemas. There's a lot of videos on YouTube about coffee enemas. We don't recommend coffee at all. That's why we do different types of enemas. But same way. And you just let it go, and you lay it on your right side for about 10 minutes. And it's only 2 cups, and the longer you can hold it, the better, because this is more like a retention enema. It's not, and you want all these compounds to absorb as much as you can to have a great effect.
So Mercy, when our friend did it, did she do like 1 cup, and was it a retention enema that she did, or how did she do it for her mother?
Yeah, it was about 2 cups.
2 cups, and then it was just a retention enema?
It's a retention, but you ended up always going to the bathroom. So
a retention enema. So for instance, like when we do an enema, we usually do about 4 cups. and then you go to the, you let it sit there for about 10 minutes, and then you go to the bathroom. And the purpose of that is that it will get out toxins and this kind of thing. But a retention enema is something that you give in smaller amounts for the purpose of it staying in the system. You can let it stay in the system overnight so that you are exposed to the nutritive or other values of it. And so it's a little bit different when you do a retention versus a regular enema.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Awesome. Just a little bit of context for a previous question. The previous question about the injections, that was for a person who's getting the injections every 28 days. So it's one of those basically monthly injections. So I don't know if the advice changes there.
Well, good idea to ask you. I will ask the doctor to be sure, because it seems that this is a medication that's going to stay in your system for 28 days. So it might be a different thing. So
I think this too, the thing about schizophrenia is that it is associated with gut issues, inflammation, and this type of thing. And so I do hope that as they are making changes in their diet and lifestyle and being very, very anti-inflammatory and intentional about that, that their overall mental status will improve as well. And so I think we have to kind of balance between the medication and whatever benefits that it might be having versus the need to detox. And we have to pray and ask the Lord for guidance upon that, and so I think God has a way for every single person. We just have to pray and ask the Lord for wisdom.
There's one thing that's called leaky gut, leaky brain. So also the wheat products there's studies that are linked to schizophrenia. So it might be some foods that are causing these issues. So I will go 100% anti-inflammatory, unprocessed, balanced, whole plant-based diet. We have a book that we have a 7-day menu. So I will follow, the healthiest menu that you can ever have to give you the best chance.
So Nwamiko, Joy was asking about eating grains. What if we eat organic, non-GMO grains? And, so the thing that we were saying is that while we are healing, we just don't recommend things that are difficult to digest. And if you're sick, you might want to stay off of them. Like I'm off of grains right now. And instead of grains, I eat pseudograins, which are seeds of non-grass plants. They're broad-leafed plants. And so I listed them, the quinoa, buckwheat, and that kind of thing. The nice thing about them is that you don't have to cook them as long. They cook in 10, 20, 30 minutes at the most. And they're much easier on the digestive system. I'll tell you a story. I have a relative who is on insulin for diabetes, and he's Asian. So of course they eat rice every single day, brown rice every single day, and not interested in doing this diet because we're saying, eat quinoa and buckwheat and that kind of stuff. And they weren't interested. And when they had some gastritis issues and that kind of thing, they also were diagnosed with a new mass in the lungs. And so I said, why don't you just try our diet and see what it does for you and re-image in about 2 weeks. And so they were willing to do that. Within 1 day of doing this diet, they were so blown away at how well their blood sugar was controlled that they were willing to keep on with it, And so I don't know exactly why that is. Me having all of the chronic things that have happened to me, I have realized that diet is not the only thing that contributes to inflammation and blood sugar control and that kind of thing. It's also going to be about the stress that food induces. Like if you have TMJ issues, the sympathetics that charge up when you're in pain and stuff, that might cause your blood sugar to go up. And so you just by eating foods that are harder on a digestive tract that is suffering, it's going to possibly cause your sympathetics. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it all out. But we just do know that the easier that you make it on your digestive tract, the more nutrition that you give to yourself, like with soaking and sprouting, and getting rid of foods that are hard on the digestive system, you're going to get through this a lot better.
Awesome. Great advice. 2 other questions. not necessarily contextual to the presentations, but it seems that people want to get a little bit more information while they have your attention. So one person was asking the question, what do you do when there's a blood clot? And I think the same person also asked, is it possible, or where can we get Alimed shipped in Canada?
So Alamed is something that's made in the UK that apparently, just like 1 teaspoon, you have like 1,000 cloves of garlic or something. It's pretty intense. And so, Dr. Christopher, who does all the herbs, he was recommending like 16 cloves of garlic a day. I haven't gotten to that point, but I have found that just by eating a lot of raw garlic, and we have a recipe for that with blending up 2 cloves of garlic with lemon juice, a real easy way to get raw garlic into the system. I don't know if you have to pay the expense, because it costs over $100 for one of these bottles of Alamed. I am not convinced that that is exactly what you need, because I believe that the Lord would make it possible for all of us to have good health. And I think that it's possible with just getting raw garlic.
Awesome. I agree with that. And the person also asked about blood clots. What would you recommend for blood clots? Is it the garlic as well? Would you recommend that, or what's your thoughts on that? Okay.
Yes, the garlic is blood thinner. Also, we have the turmeric. Turmeric is a blood thinner also. Yeah, I'll do it.
Natural blood thinner.
Right. And you could do something like cayenne pepper, and all of these things that we're going to do that are anti-inflammatory. Remember, I told you about my dentist with the stroke, right? All of these things are going to be very, very helpful. Getting the meat out of the diet, because then you're going to get the toxins, the lipopolysaccharide, and the fats out of the diet. You're going to be putting in the greens that you need. You're going to be getting sunlight, which opens up your blood vessels. Just a multifaceted approach.
But final question, the gentleman with that asked about the injections, he wants to know, is it possible for him to get off those meds that he's on?
I don't think it's anything impossible for God. I will do my best of best, because we have help people that are the impossible are happening. Right now, I'm actually helping a person that, she's ready to go to dialysis, right? So we're working really hard for her not to. So just yesterday, her numbers are improving. The kidney improving just after 3 weeks. So if the kidneys can improve, you can get off of dialysis, you can get off of anything, but you have to do your best. There's no chance to make mistakes anymore. When you have a serious condition, you have to go 100%, and then you have to trust that God is going to do the rest. There is a passage that Sister White said that if you do everything and anything humanly possible, applying the natural remedies that God has given us, God will do the rest. So, we have to trust. What are we going to do when the Sunday law comes and we cannot buy those medications anymore, right? So we have to do our best following God's principles, and we can always expect that a miracle is going to happen.
Amen. Amen. Wow. Dr. Maattanen, I know you've been kind of quiet the entire time. Was there anything you wanted to just sum up your thoughts with regarding what you just heard, or regarding immunization, or anything that you didn't finish in your presentation?
Well, no, I really appreciated the other presentations, the very practical part of really applying what we know God has given us as instruction, right? I think the only thing that I would add is that we shouldn't add to what God has given us. I think we have clear indication from Revelation 22 that for the word of God, we shouldn't add extra things that God didn't intend. And I appreciate what Joyce, I was rebuked by some of the, the how do we say, processed foods that we're putting into our systems, right? This is the reality. Are we processing, are we, when it comes to medical care, are we using processed medical care, right? Are we using ways that, are above and beyond what God intended? And so that's, I'll let you interpret it, whoever's watching. in your own way, but I really think that that God has given us enough, as I think both Joyce and Mercy have pointed out, to be healthy in simple ways. If we just apply them, it's sometimes harder to apply, but if we do apply those things, it really helps. So,
yes, that was awesome stuff, guys. And so, as you're watching, those of you who are watching, maybe some of this information is new, and maybe you've been challenged, as Dr. Maattanen just shared. Maybe some of it you're seeing as a stumbling block. But I challenge you to look at that stumbling block like a stepping stone, because I think God just wants us to rise up higher than where we are right now. He wants us to elevate our level, elevate our experience, elevate our health. And so that's why he's given us this advice. I'm going to close right now with a prayer. But unless anybody stops me, there's anything else that one of the presenters wanted to share, let's have a closing prayer. Let's do that now. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this opportunity just to dive into the world of science and salvation, to see how the author of the scripture as well as science has advice in both areas. And you don't leave us helpless, dear God. You desire us to be in health so that we can just live lives that are abundant, joyful, and reflect you. So be with us now as we depart from here. Give us the strength and encouragement to apply these principles. And Lord, we want to see these things manifested in our lives. We want testimonies from these apparent tests that we experience. So bring them to us. Bless the presenters. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. God bless you and have a good night.